Well, hello there and welcome to World News, live from Algiers on All 24 News. I'm Karim Zachary and here's what's making headlines tonight. In Gaza, dozens were killed in Zionist occupation massacres while thousands flee as aid blocked to shelters as Security Council convenes over growing famine. And in Lebanon, 44 were killed in just 24 hours. Heavy bombardment leaves trail of destruction across the south. And in the UN Security Council, Algeria urges calm in Sudan, and UN Representative Ammar bin Jama blames outside powers for stirring conflict and calls for immediate ceasefire talks. And Sahrawi government condemns killing of prisoner Omar Bahia al-Hassan by occupation forces and calls for independent international investigation. Stay tuned to our channel for the details on these stories and more right after this. Well, hello again and welcome to the details. First off in our file, at dawn on Tuesday, Zionist occupation forces carried out 2 massacres in Beit Hanun, northern Gaza, killing at least 15 Palestinians, with many still trapped under the rubble. Mahmoud Bassal, spokesperson for Gaza's civil defense, confirmed the attacks targeted the Shabbat and Kafarna families. He also highlighted the occupation forces continued to lay siege to the city, which is home to around 7,500 Palestinians, cutting off all access from every direction.
The soldiers entered in the morning with tanks, and we had forces around us. They told us to get out and separated us into 2 groups, men on one side and women on the other. Then they told us to hurry out. We didn't take anything with us, not even winter clothes or anything else, and we left from Beit Hanun to Gaza. They took the men and are still searching them, one by one, as they head to Gaza, and we are waiting for them. Some of them were taken, and some were let go. The ambulance arrived, but we couldn't get through, and they threw gas and smoke at us. We lost our way. God willing, things will get better.
God help us, everyone is in the same situation. Have mercy on us. We have been displaced 50 times. 50 times. Just kill us and relieve us from this life.
Local sources, meanwhile, report that early Tuesday, occupation forces stormed several shelters in Beit Hanun, northern Gaza, where thousands of displaced people were seeking refuge. The forces forcibly evacuated them at gunpoint, with heavy gunfire ringing out as the displaced were forced to leave immediately. Displaced Palestinians in northern Gaza are facing dire conditions, caught in the grip of famine and constant shelling. Living in temporary camps, they're struggling to survive after the occupation destroyed every aspect of life in the besieged Strip. Here's Yassine Rikti with the details.
For over 400 days, northern Gaza has been ravaged by relentless violence, leaving thousands of displaced Palestinians struggling to survive in overcrowded shelters. Entire neighborhoods, like those in Jabalia and Beit Lahia, have been obliterated by airstrikes and artillery, leaving families torn apart with no means of contact.
We are starving and displaced. At first, we were living normally. We received supplies twice a month. So there is truly no food, no water, no medicine, nothing at all. We are deprived of everything, everything. Even the air we breathe is taken away from us.
Every day of the year passes with no peace. Instead, there is bombings, attacks, and constant suffering. No rest at all.
Muhammad, another displaced father from Jabalia, like many others, is now living in a stadium in Gaza City, where basic needs, food, water and medical care are in short supply.
We lost loved ones, dear ones. We have lost 5 martyrs, lost detainees. I haven't been able to reach out to my family in Beit Lahia for almost 35 days. Since the beginning of this latest incursion, I don't know if they are alive or not.
Hospitals are overwhelmed and humanitarian aid is unable to reach those who need it most. And despite global calls for a ceasefire, international action remains slow, leaving the people of Gaza trapped in a seemingly endless nightmare.
We call on all Arab countries to consider us, to stand united with us and the Palestinian people. We hope to return to our homes. True, we no longer have homes, as they were destroyed, but we have family in the south, some here and others in the north. We are torn into 3 parts.
As the violence escalates, the future of Palestinians remains uncertain, and hope for peace fades further each day.
And in another development, Mahmoud Basal, spokesperson for the Gaza Civil Defense, revealed that despite the entry of aid for the first time in weeks, hundreds of displaced families in Beit Hanun were denied access. For the first time in 39 days, 3 trucks carrying flour, canned goods and water reached Beit Hanun. However, Zionist forces forced the evacuation of displaced families from shelters and schools using excessive force, preventing them from receiving any of the aid.
Until now, we are not allowed to enter medical facilities or receive any medical supplies. The same goes for food. We are also not allowed access to ambulances, despite our demands to the world. We are working under very difficult conditions. The injured must either walk on foot to reach Kamal Adwan Hospital or be carried on shoulders to get treatment. For those who can't make it, they are simply left to die in their homes or in the streets.
UN spokesman Stefan Dujarric announced on Monday that Zionist occupation forces blocked 85% of aid convoys to northern Gaza last month. He confirmed that out of 98 requests submitted by OCHA for permits to cross the Gaza Valley checkpoint, only 15 were approved. Dujarric stressed OCHA's growing concern for the remaining Palestinians in northern Gaza as the siege tightens.
OCHA is concerned about the fate of Palestinians remaining in northern Gaza as the blockade continues there and calls for the area to be open to humanitarian operations as urgently as possible, given the massive needs. Over the past 3 days, teams from OCHA, UN human rights agencies, mine clearance and other humanitarian groups have visited 9 locations in Gaza City to assess the needs of hundreds of displaced families, many of whom are returning to northern Gaza.
Meanwhile, the UN Security Council met on Tuesday evening to discuss the famine in northern Gaza following a request from Algeria, Guyana, Slovenia and Switzerland. This comes after a report from the Integrated Food Security Phase Classification System highlighted the dire situation. During the session on Palestine, Algeria's UN Ambassador Ammar bin Jama called the conditions in northern Gaza catastrophic, labeling the use of starvation as a weapon by the Zionist entity a war crime. Bin Jama also condemned the international community's inaction and its failure to hold the occupier accountable for its ongoing genocide.
This chilling report underscores the gravity of the deprivation inflicted on Palestinians, particularly in northern Gaza, where people are literally dying from starvation, from famine. This is a clear use of starvation as a method of war, which constitute a war crime. The worsening situation in Gaza, tragically, was foreseeable, with famine now ravaging the already suffering Palestinian population. Humanitarian organizations have repeatedly sounded the alarm. issuing urgent warnings as the international community remains unable to halt the oppression by the occupying Israeli forces. As President Abdelmajid Tebboune stated, this aggression clearly illustrates the international community failure to enforce universally applicable rules.
And on the ground on Tuesday, the Qassam Brigade's Hamas's military wing released footage of clashes with Zionist forces east of Jabalia camp in northern Gaza. They claim to have hit a Zionist force with an anti-fortification shell followed by close-range gunfire and grenades near Beit Lahia. The brigades also reported sniping a soldier and hitting a foot patrol with anti-personnel shells in Jabalia. They destroyed a Merkava tank near Al-Fakura school, killing its crew and seizing a machine gun. Additionally, Qassam forces launched a joint operation with the Mater Omar al-Qassam's fighters and the Netzarin Axis, using mortars and rockets to target occupation forces. And in the past 48 hours, Zionist forces have carried out 5 massacres in Gaza, killing 62 Palestinians and injuring 147. The death toll since October 7th has risen to over 43,600, with more than 103,000 wounded. Among the latest victims, 16 were killed in a bombing of displaced persons tents in Mawasi Khan Yunis. Another 11 were martyred in a drone strike north of Rafah, while 6, including 4 children, died in a strike on Deir el-Bala in central Gaza. And finally, to wrap up this file, UNRWA has condemned the lack of humanitarian access to Gaza, calling the situation catastrophic and placing full blame on the Zionist entity for the ongoing crisis. More details with Sofian Kenturi now.
Tens of thousands of Palestinians in northern Gaza are now begging for food in their own land. As the violence escalates, food aid has nearly dried up. Hunger, malnutrition, and disease are spreading fast, and the meager bites of aid that do trickle in barely scratch the surface of what's needed. The UNRWA, which is supposed to protect the rights and well-being of Palestinian refugees, hasn't been able to get into northern Gaza for a month now. The area is on the brink of famine, with last month seeing lowest levels of aid in ages amid intensified attacks by the Zionist forces.
The situation is unfolding here and continues to worsen. People are losing a lot of hope. As I say, with the winter coming and the rains coming, 13 months of war with malnourishment, people really are suffering. The suffering continues to worsen.
Northern Gaza has been completely cut off from food for a month, and requests by UN for access have been turned down every time. Even the World Health Organization has only been able to conduct a few emergency evacuations.
The month of October, it was an average of 37 trucks a day into the Gaza Strip. 37 trucks a day for a population of 2.2 million people who need absolutely everything. It's not enough. It's never going to be enough. The forced displacements have continued. The forced displacements of the north have continued. I've met people in the last week who have been displaced in Gaza City from the besieged area of the north. They're traumatized. They're absolutely traumatized.
With no reliable access to food, water, or medicine, Palestinians in northern Gaza are being forced to survive in unbearable conditions, holding in the face of a huge struggle.
Moving on to the other developments in Lebanon now. On Tuesday, Lebanese Hezbollah confirmed it launched a series of fatty tactical missiles at Zionist sites in Haifa, northern occupied Palestine. The party shared a video on its Telegram account showing missile strikes on the Qurayut area north of Haifa. The attack, which used Fatih 1 and Malak 2 missiles, resulted in a fire and significant material damage in the targeted area. And in the past 24 hours, Zionist occupation raids have left 44 Lebanese martyrs and 88 others wounded. The Lebanese Ministry of Health reported on Tuesday that the death toll from the Zionist aggression since October 8th last year has now reached 3,287 martyrs, with 14,222 wounded. The devastating toll continues to rise as the violence persists. And on the night of Monday to Tuesday, Zionist occupation forces targeted displaced people in Ain Yaqub Akar Governorate, northern Lebanon. The raid carried out by Zionist warplanes struck a house housing displaced families, leaving at least 28 people martyred or wounded, including both Lebanese and Syrian nationals. The Lebanese news agency reports that several individuals remain missing under the rebel, according to the civil defense.
We have people who have been staying in the apartment downstairs for over 4 to 5 years. A mother and 4 Syrian children live in the lower house. They have been with us for 4 to 5 years. We do not have any political party connection, nor do I believe that my uncle or his wife's family, who were here from Al-Sharara family, do as well.
Israel killed civilians. There are no Hezbollah members here. They killed our brothers and sisters who came here from the south. They were our guests. This is a criminal act. There was also a family of Syrian refugees who lived with them in the same building. Israel claims that there are Hezbollah members here, but no, there is no Hezbollah here.
My heart is broken for my house, our house, my father's house. This was his room. What can I say? Our soul is in pain. All the good memories we had are gone.
Similarly, on Tuesday, Zionist raids in Lebanon left several casualties in the eastern city of Hermel. 2 Lebanese were killed and 6 others injured when occupation forces targeted a house in the Imali neighborhood. Later in the day, Zionist airstrikes hit the village of Bashlamiyah in the Mount of Lebanon Governorate, killing 8 and injuring 5. Additionally, a raid on Tafahta, southern Lebanon, resulted in 5 martyrs. These latest attacks add to the mounting toll from the ongoing aggression. Meanwhile, Lebanese health crews have recovered the bodies of 2 martyrs from the rubble of building in Kfar Ruman, Nabatiyah, after it was bombed by Zionist forces on the night of Monday to Tuesday. The mayor of Kfar Ruman, Ali Muallim, was martyred in the attack along with another individual. The airstrike targeted a building where the 2 were inside, bringing the toll of casualties in the region even higher. And finally in this file, Zionist warplanes have carried out a series of intense raids on the southern suburbs of Beirut, including the destruction of health facilities. Since Tuesday morning, more than 13 airstrikes have targeted the area, leveling a medical complex in Beir el Abed and damaging the surroundings of a Sayyida Zainab complex. The raids also destroyed large buildings across the suburb as the occupation forces unleashed dozens of missiles, leaving widespread devastation. To other topical news now. In the latest escalation in the Middle East, American and British forces launched airstrikes targeting the Hodeidah governorate in western Yemen. According to media reports, this bombing follows a series of intense aerial flights over several Yemeni governorates, further intensifying the ongoing conflict in the region. Algeria's permanent representative to the United Nations, Ammar Benjama, urged external parties to stop fueling the conflict in Sudan. Speaking on behalf of the A3+ group at a UN Security Council session on Sudan and South Sudan, Benjama highlighted that continued foreign interference is one of the key factors undermining the efforts to bring peace to Sudan.
And we seize this occasion to call again on external actors to abstain from fueling the conflict and respect international law. The persistent foreign interferences in the Sudanese conflict could be one of the main factors of the failure of all peace efforts.
Similarly, Algeria's permanent representative to the United Nations urged the rapid support forces to halt their attacks on Al-Fashir and Al Jazeera state. He called on all parties involved to agree to an immediate ceasefire to ensure the protection of civilians in Sudan. Let's take a listen.
We must insist on accountability to respond more effectively to the violation of international law and international humanitarian law. In this connection, we call on the RSF to halt their offensive against Al-Fashir and Al Jazeera state and to uphold respect to the international humanitarian law and the principles of human rights. The non-observance of any code of conduct by these forces is in this regard a source of deep concern.
Benjama also confirmed the ongoing deterioration of the situation in Sudan, highlighting the catastrophic humanitarian impact on innocent civilians due to the escalating conflict in the country.
As we speak, the situation in Sudan is in continued deterioration. It is marked by catastrophic humanitarian consequences on innocent civilians. Innocent civilians who are paying the heavy toll of this deadly conflict. Each day, women, girls, and children are targeted by unspeakable atrocities. And the recent incident in Al Jazeera state are yet another dark episode. Yet, despite the worrying situation on the ground, the international community has not been able to make any breakthrough in peace effort, in spite of our multiple calls and decisions. Notwithstanding, we remain hopeful that the planned initiative and meetings by the UN Secretary General Personnel Envoy, Mr. Ramtan Lamamra, and the African Union, building on the Jeddah process, will bear fruits.
To other African development, the Sahrawi government has condemned the killing of Sahrawi political prisoner Omar Bahi al-Hassan by Moroccan occupation authorities. In a statement from the Ministry of Occupied Territories and Sahrawi Communities, the government affirmed that the ongoing crimes against humanity committed by the Moroccan occupation in the occupied part of Western Sahara represent a blatant violation of international humanitarian law.
The Ministry of Occupied Territories and Sahrawi Diaspora, upon receiving the news of the murder of the Sahrawi citizen Omar Bahia al-Hassan, aged 58, by the Moroccan occupation forces, confirms that the systematic continuation of the Moroccan occupation forces' crimes against humanity committed against Sahrawi civilians in the occupied part of Western Sahara constitutes a blatant violation of international humanitarian law and international human rights law.
Similarly, the Sahrawi government has called on the United Nations to launch an independent international investigation into the circumstances surrounding the arrest and death of Sahrawi citizen Omar Bahi al-Hassan. In a statement from the Ministry of Occupied Territories and Sahrawi Communities Affairs, the government urged the international community to take full responsibility for protecting Sahrawi civilians from ongoing killings, torture, repression, and political arrest linked to their support for Western Sahara's independence.
The United Nations, which has been present since 1991, must intervene to open an independent international investigation into the circumstances and conditions surrounding the arrest and the death of the Sahrawi detainee Omar Bahi al-Hassan, as well as other deaths that have claimed the lives of dozens of Sahrawi citizens, some of whom were shot with live ammunition, such as the cases of Sahrawi martyrs Najm al-Karhi, Rashid al-Shain, Saeed Damber, and others.
To another topical story now. The COP29 summit kicked off in Baku, Azerbaijan, with global leaders and climate organizations in attendance. The event comes amid concerns over the potential re-election of Donald Trump, with fears the U.S. might backtrack on climate efforts. The story with Zahra Farjani now.
In a mix of hope, concern and caution amid interwoven global crises, world leaders and political figures are gathering in Baku, Azerbaijan for another push to tackle climate change. Speaking from the COP29 summit, the UN Climate Convention's Executive Secretary shared a message of reassurance with the international community, emphasizing a steadfast commitment to climate action as the only path to protecting our planet, even with political shifts like Trump's return to the White House.
Many of you have been reporting on the climate implications of political events in the last weeks. I'll just say this. Our process is strong, it's robust, and it will endure. After all, global cooperation is the only way humanity survives global warming.
In a message almost like a humanitarian plea, Antonio Guterres addressed the world again, calling for a bold move to dismantle financial barriers that hold back developing nations from getting their fair share in addressing the climate crisis. He urged wealthy countries to step up to their moral and historical responsibilities towards these nations.
President, COP29 must tear down the walls of climate finance. Developing countries must not leave Baku empty-handed. A deal is a must, and I'm confident it will be reached. We need a new finance goal that meets the moment.
Amid both hope for the future of the climate agreement and concerns over the planet's fate, the Azerbaijani president's voice emerged as one of reason at the Baku summit. He called for a fair approach in the fight against climate change, promoting a smooth and sustainable energy transition that still respects the right of some countries to use their fossil fuel resources.
Many other important criteria which should be a basis for kind of evaluation of the country's performance, but not the country's natural resources, which are the gift of the God.
As the COP29 climate summit unfolds, the world stands at a crossroads. Either we move forward in cooperation to achieve climate justice, or we risk facing environmental challenges that could quickly spiral out of control in this critical moment where interests and responsibilities converge.
And in a related story, Colombian President Gustavo Petro has declared a national state of emergency due to widespread flooding and landslides caused by heavy rains. Speaking in Bogotá on Monday, Petro emphasized that the measure aims to expedite aid for those affected. He highlighted the severe impact of climate change on the country and announced the cancellation of his trip to Azerbaijan for the UN Climate Conference.
Por esa razón, por lo que acontece en estos días.
For this reason, in response to recent events, a nation disaster has been declared due to climate variability, which is causing unpredictable and unusual impacts, heightening vulnerability across regions. This declaration allows us to redirect national budget resources from unrelated sectors to support regions impacted by current climate events.
Víctimas climáticas de la situación actual.
And in another development, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi and Russian Security Council Secretary Sergei Shoigu held security talks in Beijing on Tuesday. According to Russian news agency Interfax, Shoigu stressed that Beijing and Moscow's main focus is countering the U.S. policy of dual containment. Shoigu is also set to attend the China International Aviation and Aerospace Exhibition in Zhuhai this week. North Korea has ratified a mutual defense treaty with Russia, formalizing their growing military ties. According to North Korea's official news agency, the treaty was ratified by a decree from leader Kim Jong-un and will take effect after both countries exchange their ratified documents. The move follows a unanimous vote by Russian lawmakers last week and a signing by President Vladimir Putin. Germany's main opposition parties have agreed to hold early elections on February 23rd following the collapse of the ruling coalition. The Social Democratic Party, the Green Party, and opposition group reached this decision, though the final approval rests with President Frank-Walter Steinmeier. Time to catch up. More stories in the news in brief by Selma Nasib now.
Alex Didier Fail-Sameh has assumed office as Haiti's interim prime minister, promising to enhance security amid escalating gang violence, including a recent bold attack on a commercial aircraft trying to land in the capital. Fail-Sameh was appointed by Haiti's Transitional Council to replace Gary Connell, who served only 6 months. Argentina's inflation has fallen to 193%. Dipping below the 200% mark for the first time in almost a year. This reduction is attributed to President Javier Milei's aggressive austerity measures. Although inflation is slowing, the spending cuts have hurt consumer demand in an economy where more than half of the population is now living in poverty. Rainfall did little to slow a wildfire burning on the border of New York and New Jersey, as strong winds helped the fire grow. The Jennings Creek fire, located about 30 miles northwest of New York City, has now torched some 2,023 hectares and is 20% contained, according to officials at a press conference given by the New York State Parks Department. Flood-hit areas near the eastern city of Valencia were rushing to clear drainage systems, piling sandbags as makeshift floodgates while they prepare for another potential powerful storm. 2 weeks after the worst floods in modern Spanish history killed over 200 people, the National Weather Service issued an orange alert, the second highest for strong or torrential rains, starting on Tuesday night.
The end of our news. Thank you for watching and goodbye.